Hello, welcome to Plod with me TV. My name is Colin and this is a channel where I take you around bits of London, teach you a bit about their history. And today we are going to be going around Fitzrovia, which is a part of London just to the north of Soho, just off Oxford Street, which I'm standing on the corner of. Now before we get started, I do feel I have to apologise. I had to buy some new equipment recently and this face was not built for being in 4K and close-up, so sorry about that, but this is all I've got to work with. So I'll just spin this round and we can see there is a little street plaque there. It should be up about there, and it says Rathbone's Place on Oxford Street 1718. Now I could have sworn I read somewhere, I'll double check, that sign is actually wrong and it dates to about 1732, but I'll double check that, and if I'm right I'll put it in the text. So we're going to have a look around Fitzrovia. This will definitely take more than one video. A lot of stuff happened here and we very quickly are going to come to our first place. Hold on, let's let this lorry get past. So this is the Black Horse pub. I don't know what it's like these days, haven't been in it. I know there was a writer back in the sort of mid-20th century that described it as a sort of place where old dears would come and basically, you know, spend all day over their drinks. A guy called Julian McLaren Ross, and he could talk because he spent more time drinking than writing. But it's more famous for me, at least I think, in regards to it was a place where the singer-songwriter Ewan MacColl, he used to host a folk and blues club in here back in the 1950s. If you're not familiar with Ewan MacColl, you might know some of his works. The most famous of which would be the song The First Time, which is actually being currently used in a TV advert even now, and Dirty Old Town, probably made very popular by the Pogues. And he's also the father, or he was before he died, he was the father of Kirsty MacColl, the singer. But yeah, apparently mid-50s, folk and blues club, and then he moved it up towards Holborn. But it sort of ties in with Soho, this sort of area of, you know, being sort of a bit on the bohemian side, you know, lots of writers, artists, music, all that side of stuff. And even now, you know, it's sort of TV industry, the publishing trade, magazines, all that sort of thing. So, as it said at the start, this is Rathbone Place, and for those of you that are into your health stuff, I know these days it's all about Pilates and yoga and whatever the latest fad is. Well, Karl Marx used to come here, and no doubt a part of it was to keep him in good nick, but he used to come here to practice his fencing, and I don't think it was the ones you put up in gardens. So our next stop is a pub, and we'll have a few of these, especially around this part. And the first one is this one called the Wheatsheaf, which I have been in. It's a very nice pub, very old-fashioned, sort of classical pub, as you sort of think. And even the look of it, oh, I'll just tilt up, you see. Oh. The whole look of it's a bit sort of oldie-worldy. But before it made its name because I drank there, there was one or two other people who were a bit more famous that used to frequent the place. Namely, the poet, Dylan Thomas, and George Orwell, as it says, used to drink here. And basically you had a whole, call them, they're known as this area was known as Fitzrovia, which we'll come to. But you had a whole set, especially with writers, and they would all drink in the sort of little triangle of pubs. The Marquis of Granby, which we'll come to in a minute, was one of them. The Fitzroy Tavern up on the right. And basically, they tended to sort of just drink around here, and various ones would be the favourite of the time. They moved down to the Wheatsheaf, more or less after World War II, because apparently the ones that they had frequented, like the Fitzroy, had become too popular. I suppose people heard all these writers and artists and various things were staying there, and people used to come to visit. Was drinking the pub, and they sort of thought, well, this is getting a bit too trendy for us. You know, we are bohemians, we want our own place, and so they tended to shift down towards the Wheatsheaf. Now, I'm just going to step across the street and show you this shop, this corner. And you're going to ask yourself, why are you showing me a shop, Colin, especially when it's closed? Well, that's because this has a bit of film history behind it. There is a now regarded as a classic, totally derided at the time, but there's a movie called Peeping Tom, and it's all about a serial killer who takes photographs of models. And this shop was used in Peeping Tom, and indeed the person, the killer in it, had a space above, and that's where he would take the models to do the photographs of them, and they're also photographs of a certain sort. And this was a shop where gentlemen would come to buy a certain sort of magazine that displayed that sort of stuff. But yeah, the famous movie makers Powell and Pressburger, Peeping Tom was made by Michael Powell on his own, and at the time, because of I suppose the sex and the murders and all the rest of it, it got absolutely slammed by the critics. Pretty much ended his movie making career, and he went off, under the doldrums and did other things. And then I think it was about 15 years later, one of his biggest fans happened to be a little known filmmaker in America called Martin Scorsese, who came over and wanted to meet him and discovered this, what he considered to be a bit of a genius, not making movies anymore, and took him back to America and restarted his career. But yeah, when you watch it now, it was obviously ahead of its time, and it was pretty, I suppose, brutal in a way, but it was, a very good movie. Now, we'll be doubling back down here in a minute, but there are some houses and people who stayed here that I just wanted to show you. So this is Percy Street. And we are going to go as far as number 18, which I believe is the one with the black door over there. Okay. Well, number 18 has a bit of a special place in literary history. So as we know, because we just discussed him, George Orwell was one of the people that drank in the area, lived around here, I believe. And number 18 is where his second wife, Sonia Branwell, I believe it was, had a room. And that was in that room, it was that room that Orwell set as the sort of place for the illicit tryst between Julia and Winston in 1984. So if you don't know the book, basically Big Brother watches everything. They managed to find a place, on the sort of back end of nowhere where they can go and be on their own and not be watched, and basically conduct their affair. And it's really described as incredibly grubby. But it was a room here that he based it on. And then if we swing round, obviously the houses that were here are long gone, probably because of the Blitz, because a number of places in Fitzrovia got hit. But in this building, because it was opposite number 18, hold on, I may as well talk to me, then look at a bank. So yeah, in this building, for a while, not too long before she died, I think it was a couple of years before she died, lived a certain Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, Mary Wollstonecraft, if you aren't familiar, very big advocate, very early advocate of women's rights. Used to make herself unpopular at dinner parties by having the temerity to suggest that women could do the same things as men. Not surprised, that's totally ridiculous idea. And she was a big advocate for women's rights in her writings and indeed in her actions, including having a child out of wedlock, which sort of had her, ostracised by society. But she lived here close to her death in 1797, and she actually died in childbirth, giving birth to her second child, a daughter called Mary. Mary would go on to marry a poet called Percy Bysshe Shelley, and Mary would write Frankenstein. So if ever there was proof that women could do stuff as well as men, I think it's there. Okay, now we're literally just a few doors down at number 15. Let's swing that bad boy round. Go on, off you go. There we go. Okay. It says there's two blue plaques you can see. The left hand one, Charles Laughton, 1899-1962, actor, lived here between 1928 and 31. Now, Laughton went off to America, became like a dual American-British citizen, but he was one of the great cinema actors of his age. One Oscar, nominated for several others. Made the definitive portrayal of King Henry VIII. So whenever you see King Henry VIII, he's getting portrayed as this big, chicken munching, sort of, I couldn't give a rat's ass ruler and all the rest of it, and just, doing his own thing. It was his portrayal that sort of led the way, and a lot of people have followed or tried to find their own versions of it. And that's the part he won the Oscar for. But he also played brilliant versions of like Captain Bligh and Mutiny on the Bounty, is particularly nasty. He could do comedy and things like Hobson's Choice. He could do drama and stuff like Spartacus and Witness for the Prosecution. He was just basically a master actor. In fact, I remember watching a documentary with Richard Dreyfuss talking about him. He was in awe of his talent, and he was explaining that Laughton would actually change the syntax of his delivery to match whoever it was he was acting against. And he just thought he was an incredible talent. And let's face it, Richard Dreyfuss isn't bad either. The next blue plaque is for a poet who I'd never heard of until I had to look him up, called Coventry Patmore, who lived from 1823 to 96, and he lived here just for a couple of years, it says, 1863 to 64. But he was quite famous in his day for his poetry, and there was one that he wrote, I believe it was called An Angel in the House, something like that. But basically it was all very twee, and it was all about a woman's place is in the home, and that makes for the perfect marriage and all that, which I'm sure Mary Wollstonecraft 80 years earlier wouldn't have had any time for. So that's that. And then there's one more house I really think deserves a visit, and strangely enough doesn't have a plaque. Let's see if you can guess why when I tell you about it. So Okay, we are looking at number 4 here. Let me just tilt up. Every time I tilt up, it has a tendency to go to the right a bit. There we go. So, I think this is a lovely house. It's got that sort of, what would you say, Art Nouveau, Art Deco-y sort of look to it. Beautiful house, I think. And now it's obviously a beauty place, as so many places are. But can you guess who lived in a house like this? Time for my bit for Through the Keyhole. Any suggestions, anyone? If I said his first name was Alois, would that help at all? No? Well, how about if I said Alois Hitler, who was the stepbrother to a certain Adolf, and by all accounts, according to Alois's wife, his stepbrother paid a visit here prior to the First World War. So, as I say, no plaque. Surprise, surprise. But, yeah, a bit of unusual history there. And he actually went on, you know, obviously sort of lived a very underground life. He moved up to Liverpool, and I think he went back to Europe after the war and whatnot. Led a very sort of normal life from what I've read. I haven't looked into it too much, but from the articles that I read, just seemed to, you know, stay away from all the crap that his stepbrother got up to. I just thought I would mention over in this corner, because this got not 1 but 2 plaques for it. And it says, in memory of 7 members of the London Auxiliary Fire Service who died as a result of injuries received World War II on the night of 17th, 18th of September 1940, so that would have been the start of the Blitz, when a building on this site, then in use as a sub-fire station, received a direct hit from a high-explosive bomb. And the plaque also remembers fireman Henry Errington, who, for saving the lives of 2 fellow firemen in this place on the same night, was awarded the George Cross. Now, the George Cross is the civil equivalent of the Victoria Cross in the military. Like, he must have done something extremely brave. This wasn't just your average wartime bit of heroism. He must have done something extremely brave. And then there's another plaque to the same guy. It's from, let's see, from the Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation, because apparently Harry's name, when it wasn't Errington, was Erringott, son of Jewish immigrants living in Soho. So, yeah, he must have done something exceptional. Now, I am just going to stand in the corner here and hope I don't get run over. But if I tell you to look just at the corner of that building of the Marquis of Granby, there are 2 plaques. So, the one at the front on the right says SPP 1791, and that stands for St Pancras Parish, 1791. And the one on the left says SMB 1821, and that stands for St Marylebone Parish, 1821. Now, there's a reason why I'm showing you this. The people who, like Orwell and Dylan Thomas and all the artists, Augustus John and various others, who like to get, you know, absolutely off their faces drunk in places like the Wheatsheaf or the Marquis of Granby, or the Fitzrovia, Fitzroy. They would come here later in the evening. Because of the licensing laws, pubs would have you know, different opening times. In fact, it was like that until about 15-20 years ago. They would have different opening times because they used to close up during the afternoons, and then depending on when they opened in the afternoon, they would close earlier or later in the evening. So apparently the Granby would stay open a half hour later than the pubs nearby. Yeah. So they would all pile out of the Fitzroy or the Wheatsheaf because it was in a different parish and had different licensing, and would stay open a half hour later. So a little bit of drinking history there. And apparently the Marquis of Granby used to be frequented quite frequently by one Dylan Thomas, because there was a bit of a sort of homosexual community here, especially in the 20th century. And guardsmen used to apparently come down here to pick on some of the local homosexuals, and apparently Dylan Thomas used to like to come down here to pick on the guardsmen and have fights with them, sort of give them a taste of their own medicine. He was also a bit of a hard nut. And I thought I'd show you this sign because hold on, we got a helicopter. Go away. Right. I thought I'd show you this sign because there are lots of pubs around London and elsewhere called the Marquis of Granby. And I knew the rough idea of the history behind it, but this actually explains it. So, it says here, the Marquis of Granby is the title borne by the eldest son of the Duke of Rutland and John Manners. And John Manners was probably the most famous to carry the title. On the 31st of July 1760, John brilliantly stormed Warburg at the head of the British cavalry, capturing 1,500 men and 10 pieces of artillery. He returned to England in 1763, a popular hero, and as such was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in 1766. Many public houses are named after the Marquis of Granby, as he set up many of his men as innkeepers when they left the army. So it was basically a bit of a, you know, I was in the army, I'm coming out, what am I going to do now? And apparently, you know, he used to arrange for payments to be made to them to get set up, and then recognition. A lot of them named their pubs after him. So that's the first pub I've noticed where it actually gives you the whole explanation. And I hope you could hear that over the helicopter. Now, this is the Newman Arms. Apparently much frequented by Orwell as well at one stage, because it was not so big on the spirits but more on the beer, and he was a bit of a beer snob, and apparently that's why he used to like coming here. Also, just down that passage, I don't know if you can see down the passageway, but there's a TV program used to be made called Minder, and at the end of Minder there was a sort of montage of photographs with the two main characters with a bent lamppost. Well, just at the end of that passageway where there's a bollard, that's where that took place. But more historically, let's have a look up here. You can see at the top middle window of the Newman Arms there is a picture of a lady, and she's sort of looking very inviting for you to come in and, you know, enjoy the place, and that's reminiscent of the fact that this was once a brothel. So that is the Newman Arms. I think it's also supposed to be famous for its pies. Now, I shall also... oh, hold on, what's happened there? Okay. Up the end of the street there, we have the Duke of York, another pub, which again, Orwell, he obviously liked to drink. Orwell apparently used to like going to drink there with another writer called Anthony Burgess, and they used to apparently spend a fair amount of time drinking in there. But it was also famous, certainly in the mid-20th century. It had a very eccentric landlord called Alf Klein, and he used to cut the ties of customers that came into the place and then pin them up. Apparently he ended up with a collection of over 1,500. Not sure if they're still there. I must have a nip in sometime and have a look. And then I thought I'd just show you this little sign which has been left built into the wall, and it says Hearts of Oak Benefit Society 1888. And this was like an insurance company. It sort of was quite big in its day, but it also then got sort of bought out by other companies. But mid-40s, whenever the National Health Service came in on the National Insurance Scheme, the government used to use the Hearts of Oak Benefit Society to sort of manage a form of National Insurance Scheme and make sure that people had help in times of medical issues, medical emergencies or whatever. I'm just looking at the battery. I think we've got a little bit of time left. Okay. Now I'm just going to nip down Percy Passage. Okay, so Percy Passage, and then we're going to come out onto Charlotte Street, named after Charlotte of Mecklenburg, who was George III's wife. Now, this over here is the Fitzroy Tavern, which is designed in sort of a very late 19th century style. This was frequented, as I said earlier, this was where probably they all started congregating Orwell, Dylan Thomas, painters like Augustus John. Augustus John was very, very famous portrait artist in his day, in the sort of first half of the 20th century. Probably the best in the country, they reckon, until the booze got the better of him. And he was also extremely profligate in his breeding activities. So much so, like, they reckon he might have had upward of 100 illegitimate children. So much so that it was said that if he was wandering down the street here and he saw a young child walk by, he would pat their head because there was a fair chance it might have been one of his. But some other notables that used to drink in here was Aleister Crowley, otherwise known as the Beast. He was a very famous sort of Satan worshipper. Seemed to be in high society, I suppose, that attracted the women. And one of the more, he even invented a cocktail for this place, was a Kubla Khan number 2. And then one of the other ones who used to drink here, and I'm sure he was perfectly charming company, was Albert Pierrepoint, who was the state executioner. So he would have done a lot of the things that after Nuremberg, he was taken over to Germany and conducted a number of the executions there. But he also obviously was the hangman for British hangings until it was ended. So that's the Fitzroy, and it's believed that the term Fitzrovia for the area comes from being termed as a sort of a term for the set, you know, the people, the lifestyle, the whole thing. And it was believed that Augustus John was the guy who coined the term, sort of describing all the people living their bohemian lifestyle. There have been various establishments that were famous at the time that have closed down, so I'll not bother mentioning them just because they were open for a long time. I think it might be time for a little bit of music. So I just thought I'd show you this plaque because it says Olaudah Equiano, that otherwise known as the African, 1745 to 1797. He was an abolitionist who lived at this address in 1788. And his book, The Interesting Narrative, was a bestseller. So that was basically his autobiography. And he lived here, as it says, just for about a year. And then we'll see later on in the next tour where he lived when he actually wrote the book. But towards the end of his life, he basically bounced around different parts of this part of London, and then ended up dying, I think it was in Paddington. But basically he had been a slave, and then he got freed. He was a rather good businessman, and his last owner basically agreed that once he had earned a certain amount of money, then he could, could buy his own freedom, and he did. And then he had been to, in slavery in Jamaica and various other places, and then he ended up making his way back to London and wrote his book, which became a huge bestseller, sold nine editions. And he would go off and do lectures around the country about, what happened to him in his life and protesting against slavery very effectively. So I do find it sort of ironic that the person, the religious person, the Quaker who gave him the chance to buy his own freedom was a Quaker and thought he was doing him a good turn. I was hoping to show you a mural, but it's gone. Oh, that's a pity. Okay. Well, they did say it might disappear. There's a couple of articles I read, and it obviously has. That's all right. I'll get a picture of it off the net for you. See if we can put it on. But on that wall there used to be a mural. Okay, so we are getting a bit low on the battery front. So, and it's getting a bit windy. So I think that'll do us for this tour, part 1 of Fitzrovia. There will be at least one more part, maybe 2. And I hope you enjoyed it. Keep an eye out around me anytime now. There should be appearing some links to other videos, possibly the next one for Fitzrovia. But otherwise, enjoy. Let me know if you have any comments. Let me know how it was for you. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Okay. Bye.